Let's make history.
But it's ingrained in me. You know, the Barrio is what I am. That's what defined me. That's what made me.
Originally, El Barrio, the east side of Harlem, was populated with Germans and Scandinavians. Then it was Jews, then it was Italians. In the late 1800s, you had independent contractors who were building trolley cars and elevated train lines, and they brought in Italian immigrants, a load of Italian immigrants as a source of cheap labor. And they had a shanty town along the East River. I remember as a child, my grandmother telling me the stories, because my family came to the east side of Harlem, El Barrio. It wasn't El Barrio at the time. They came to the east side of Harlem in the 1920s. My great-grandfather was from Peru. My family's pretty much from Puerto Rico through my father's side. One of my great-grandfathers, though, is from Peru, and he came with his wife, who was from Ponce, Puerto Rico, and they came to Harlem on the east side, 100th Street, over about not far from where Carver Projects is now. And they had a bunch of kids, man, and my grandmother was one of them. And my grandmother told me the story. She was the only girl. She was surrounded by boys. My Uncle Cookie, my Uncle David, how at the time, because, okay, so Spanish Harlem goes from 96th Street on the east side to about 125th, 135th, could be said. Lincoln Projects, that whole area. People don't consider it the Barrio, pero that's the east side technically. So, but at the back during Italian Harlem in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, Spanish Harlem started at Lexington Avenue. And when Puerto Ricans would cross Lexington Avenue, oh, it was smoke all day. And my grandmother used to tell me the stories how, as kids, her and her brothers, who were very mischievous, my Uncle Cookie, who I've spoken about before on this channel, and my Uncle David, who was a real hardhead, and they would all three of them, it was more, but they were born later, my Uncle Cucho, my Uncle Tato, pero when they would cross Lexington Avenue and try to explore, the Italians would chase them back over Lexington Avenue, and they would say, "Your faccia chocolate," and that means your chocolate face. And that's how the Italians used to treat the Puerto Ricans that first came into East Harlem during that period. So interesting dynamic. One time, my Uncle David, they had like, because it was Catholic, and that's how we have St. Cecilia's Church, by the way. St. Cecilia's Church, which is like a monument almost in Spanish Harlem, in El Barrio. Like me growing up, every time we walking down 106th Street and we pass St. Cecilia's Church, we do the sign of the cross. I was raised Catholic, and that's what we did. But the point why I bring that up is that that church, St. Cecilia's, was brought about through the Italians because they were Catholic. And so they used to have like these little mini parades with these floats, religious theme inspired floats on these mini parades. And one time my Uncle David, he stole some money. I guess people used to pay tithes and put money in these things. And my Uncle David stole some money out of one of them. And my great grandfather, he actually spoke Italian. He was a polyglot. He spoke Italian, he spoke several languages, and he was able to go and talk to the Italian people and in Italian and ask, you know, for them to pardon his son because he was just a child, mischievous child. And they did that. They did do that. So these were the early memories of Italian Harlem when it was transitioning into Spanish Harlem. So Italians started coming in around the 1870s. By the time the 1930s came, which is about 60 years later, they had over 100,000 Italians cramped up in the overcrowded tenements in the east side of Harlem. Now, Puerto Ricans had already started to trickle in, and by World War II, it became a Puerto Rican enclave, and a lot of Italians went to the Bronx, to the area of Arthur Ave, and out to New Jersey. Some of them did well for themselves, went out to the suburbs of Long Island, went out to upstate New York. And make no mistake, as Italians migrated from Italy, mostly Sicily, down to East Harlem, you did have significant developments in the whole mafia lifestyle, such as the Black Hand, such as the 107th Street Mob, such as the East Harlem Purple Gang, which was basically a crew of hitmen, such as the Genovese crime family, which is one of the major crime families, of the 5 crime families in New York City. When I was growing up, and even till today, you have remnants of Italian Harlem on Pleasant Avenue, on the east side. Pleasant Avenue is only a few blocks, and it's the far east side of Harlem. Once you pass First Avenue, 116th Street, 115th, around there. And that's where the Italians actually first started forming communities. They started with a shanty town, as I stated, right along the East River on 115th, 116th Street. And you still have that to this day. Patsy's Pizzeria, so forth and so on.
Well, the merchants, when we first came here, were Jewish. We had a shop, and on a holiday, we couldn't shop. You know, they closed the stores. You know, we had push carts. Yeah.
And
Oh,
what did
yes.
they sold?
They were all Italian.
All Italian.
They sold vegetables, fruits. It started from the corner of 116 here.
And they went in the neighborhood.
All
pushing
all the way down.
They were lined up.
Lined up until 111th Street.
Then, starting in the 1920s to the 1940s and 50s, is what's known as the Great Puerto Rican Migration. So most Puerto Ricans came to inhabit El Barrio around the time of World War II. Airfare was cheaper, and originally East Harlem was a subsection of Harlem. Check out my video on the history of the Polo Grounds, fascinating stuff. But originally, El Barrio was just a subsection of Harlem, but it has such a rich history that it became its completely own. It totally became its own neighborhood. And when you talk about salsa, it was a mecca for salsa music, Latin jazz. But it was known, people who were scouting, looking for talent, that kind of talent in that genre came to the east side of Harlem to find it. And it has such a rich history. Now in the 21st century, it's still a Puerto Rican neighborhood, but it's more so like a melting pot, more so mixed, because now you have a lot of Mexicans even. You have even certain places where you have a lot of Africans, Dominicans, and you know, it still has that flavor of the history as a mecca for Latin Americans. That's why it's called El Barrio. I remember one time somebody from another state tried to argue me down, like, oh, no, he said El Barrio means the neighborhood, which is true. It translates to the neighborhood, but that's the point. I just laughed. And that was the point, that it is the neighborhood as far as Latin American culture. Some notable figures who were raised in Spanish Harlem. Al Pacino, actually. Al Pacino was raised in Spanish Harlem. Obviously, Tito Puente. They renamed 110th Street Tito Puente Way. That's a beautiful thing. Jose Feliciano. You have Mark Anthony. Cicely Tyson. Rapper Black Rob, rest in peace. G-Dep. Ray Barretto, the mobster Frank Costello, and of course, the boxer Hector Camacho, the legendary boxer Hector Camacho. DJ K. Slay, who's from East River, rest in peace, K. Slay. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to Will Flores TV on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X.